Whoa. Whoa. Makara. Okay. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 prakim Rambam. Hilchos Klei HaMikdash v'ha'oivdim boi prakim Shishi, Shvi'i, and Shemini. We're going to start with the 6th chapter. The 6th chapter is all about what we call the ma'amadois, as we will see, that just like when an individual brings his or her carbon, ideally they should be there while the carbon is being brought. Communal carbonis are being brought on behalf of all the Yidden. So theoretically, all of the Jews should be standing there, should be there while the carbon is being brought. And obviously that just doesn't work. It doesn't work because there's no room for all of us and people have to have a life, meaning Hashem wants us, we cannot spend our lives in the Beis HaMikdash. So the Ma'amados, as we will see, were the representatives that stood, some of them in the Beis HaMikdash while the Karbanas are being brought, and some of them gathered in certain regions. And as we will see, there was a whole procedure. There was special tefillahs that they said. There was the reading of the Torah that they did during their turn. This chapter has 11 halachas, beginning with halacha al. It's like impossible for your carbon to be brought without you standing there in attendance. And based on that, the carbon is carbon shkol Yisrael. So logically, therefore, everyone should be there. But and therefore, tiknu neviim harishonim. I know that this expression of neviim harishonim we have various times in Chazal. Here it's referring to Shmuel and David HaMelech. David not as the Melech, but David as the Navi. That we should choose, should designate from the Yid, those who are upright, those who are sin-fearing. And they should be Shluchei called Yisrael. Here comes the word La'amoid ala Karbanis, standing on the Karbanis, and they are called Anshe Maimot. So either they are in a dignified position, they are standing in a dignified position, Maimod or Maimod, they are standing on the carbon. And these designated representatives were divided, like were the Kohanim, by Esrim Ba'arba Ma'amadois, 24 Ma'amadois groups, Keminyan Mishmaris, Kona Velaviam. Which, by the way, the number 24 by the Kohanim and the Levium also happened from the times of Shmuel and David, even though the concept of there being a rotation happened in the times of Moshe Rabbeinu in the Mishkan, in the Midbar, but we didn't have 24 groups that developed. Every group had their leader, and he's called Reish Hamayim. Halacha beis. Chol Shabbos to Shabbos, each and every week. Miskamtzim, Anshe Maimon Shalosh and Shabbos, the people would gather. Now, where would they gather? When people read this, they say, what are you talking about? They gathered in the Beis HaMikdash. No, not all of them. Me, Shoya, Mehem, either living already in the city of Yerushalayim or they live near Yerushalayim, however that's defined here. Indeed, they did what it sounds like we have to do, which is that Nechnasim LaMikdash, Mishmar Kona V'Leviyah, the ones that are also entering for that Shabbos. And as we know that the Mishmara is changed guard, right, by Musaf Shabbos, those who lived far away, they didn't go to Yerushalayim, but yes, there was a gathering. Interestingly, in other words, even the ones that were in Yerushalayim, and the Rambam says, or Koravlot, that they entered the Mikdash, they did the following. Misanim, they would fast. B'Sheni b'Shabbos, on Monday, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, and on Thursday. Wow. Normally, when we have many fast days, we already learned this, right? We fast Bahab. Monday, Thursday. Here, no, they were expected to fast 4 days out of the week straight, consecutive. Obviously, not at night, but it's still difficult. Every night they broke the fast. Avol be'erev Shabbos lo hayam misana because of kavod Shabbos, As we learned in the 30th chapter of Hilchos Shabbos, Kavod Shabbos begins from prior to Shabbos, not to enter Shabbos when you're starving. Ube'echad b'Shabbos ein misanin, k'dei shelo yetzu me'oinik Shabbos. Right, the two Devarim and Divrei Nevi'im is covered in Einik. Einik is on Shabbos proper, but you don't want to go from a state of Einik to a state of Tzoim. It's not healthy when we flux too quick. Menakotze elakotze. Halacha dal.
Often happens that we do it on Tisha B'Av. From Shabbos we go into a fast.
Tisha B'Av is like an exception. So Yakir is making a good point. It's an exception, but this was not to be done normally. It's called bipolar. You don't go too quick from high to low. From low, it doesn't work that way. Halacha dal. Now, the fasting was only on the 4 days, but each day of the week, 6 days of the week. Shehi ma'amadam. First of all, mispalalim arba tfilos. They davened 4 tfilos, which is, interestingly, we're not beginning with Ma'ariv, okay, because the fast day was not at night. Shachris, umincha, uneila, and va'oid moisif and tefillah acheres between Shachris and Mincha, in addition to Shachris and Mincha. Right, we're not going to call it carbon musaf because it doesn't represent a carbon. The noisim kapeya makoyhanim b'maimad shloisha pa'amim b'chol yom. The Shachris, ubetfila zu hayeseira, and by ne'ilah. In addition, koyden b'sefer Torah.
Is the same tefillah mitzad Shmones and
yes. The koyden and b'chlal. If you remember that generally mincha there's no nesiyas kapayim. Even though by fast days by mincha there is nesiyas kapayim, but b'chlal by mincha there's no nesiyas kapayim, so they taka didn't do then. Shachris tefillah yeseda b'nei. Now koyden b'sefer Torah shloish anoshim. And they read from the Sefer, they read, Hamayim b'chol yoim, the Shachris, and by the second added prayer, Avol b'mincha lo yehoyu koydem b'sefer, even though they would repeat the same words, but they would repeat it al peh, k'koydem es hashema. I think that Rambam is alluding to, if you remember that whole sugya, that Dvarim shebechsav I ator shoyi lo omram bal peh, just like the Dvarim shebal peh, where it was not allowed to be written down prior to the Eis Lasis Hashem. And if you remember, we learned the Tosfos. So how do people say the Shema by heart? People do say parts of Torah Shabbat by heart. So Tosfos, remember, Tosfos says because people are so familiar with it, it's okay. And as we will see, that which was read from the Torah are taka portions of the Torah that many people are familiar with. That's why maybe that I'm like you can read the Shema, you can read it by heart. Because they are terudim l'Shabbos b'hachana Shabbos. Alachei. The kibbutzim l'chol tefillah ma'abrit tefillah seilu and v'amidasam sham l'tefillah. They would gather for prayer, for supplication, and for petition. That gathering is called the Maimad. No, it's Maimad can mean standing over the Karbanis, and Maimad means this gathering. And as we have the rules by Kriyas HaTorah, whenever you read, you never read less than 10 psukim. Whenever you read, you never call up less than 3 people. Every person has to have 3 verses, with many other rules. And how did that all work out? So Beresh, on Sunday, they would read Bereshis, which is the first day, and Vayhi Rakia, which is day number 2. They would read that on the first day, just to have enough to read for 3 people. Basheni on the second day, on Monday, they would read what happened, what God Hashem did on the second day of creation, and Yikovo Hamayim, which is the 3rd day. Bashlishi on Tuesday, they would read Yikovo Hamayim and Vehima Oiros, which is the 4th day. On the Wednesday, we read Yehima Oiros, what Hashem created on the 4th day, and Vehishritzu Hamayim, the 5th day of creation. Bachamishi on the Thursday, we read Yishritzu Hamayim, Vatoitzei Haaretz, which is the 6th day. And on Friday, Toitzei Haaretz and Vayichulu. Halacha Zayin, how were they divided? The Rambam doesn't go into the pratim, but he repeats the rules. Parsha Gedolah, the one that has more psukim, Kodim Leisam B'Shnaim, they will divide into 2. And let me add another detail, Yakir, we learned this together. Remember in the Gemara, that sometimes you have a parsha that only has 5 psukim. We have this on a Shchodesh. So what they could do is, they read pasuk 1, 2, 3, and then for the second, Oila, they read pasuk 3, 4, 5, which is the case by the first day of creation. The first day of creation has 5 psukim. It's the way we do last time. We do the same thing on Rosh Chodesh. And uktana koyda echad, ushtei parshiyos koydem shachris. The same ones are read by this tefillah sheniya bas sefer from the sefer, And that's exactly how v'koyden oisoi al peh by mincha. Halacha ches. Shmoynes mechanike loyhoyu anshe maimed oisem maimed b'shachos. And guys, we learned this. The rule is whenever you say Hallel, even when there's no Musaf, there's no Maimed. Chol yem sheish korban Musaf, there wasn't the Maimed. Loy betfilah shniya shalahem, v'loy b'mincha, ela b'shachris v'nila b'lvad. Another rule, the chol yem shoy by korban eitzim. We'll see in the next halacha what the korban eitzim is. Loy hoye by Maimed b'ne'ilah, ela b'shachris v'betfilah shniya b'mincha. These are the rules. Now let's speak about korban eitzim. Halacha tes umahu korban eitzim. Says the Rambam's man kavua hoya. It was a fixed day. Lemishpachis mishpachis to specific families that were zoicha. Lotzais layadim, and during that day they would go to the forest and they would bring eitzim for the maracha, for the pyre on the altar. The yom sheyelav mishpachas ulavi eitzim. They would also bring in addition oilas nadava, and that is called karban ha'eitzim. And v'hoya lehem kamo yantif for that family, and that is expressed by the fact that if someone passed away, we were not allowed to make the hesped, we were not allowed to fast, and we were not allowed to do milachah. All right, and Isur Malacha, by the way, is not like Shabbos and Yom Tiv, but it's more similar to the Isur Malacha that of Pesach, Acher Chatzois. Okay. Now, Halacha Yud Afilu Yachid Sheis Nadev Eitzim, whether he donated wood or the special logs that go on the maracha, asur oisach hayoim behesped ubetainis vasiyas malacha, and that's a minik. And the final halacha Yud Aleph, that anshe maimed asurim, they are prohibited milasaper to take a haircut, umalachabes to launder their clothing during that week. However, the exception will be on Thursday mutarim because of Kavod Shabbos. Umipnei ma asru aleim lasaper ulachabes. They are unkempt. Ella yisapru v'yechapsu mikoydem mamash, similar to cholamoid. Like by cholamoid, we learned that if a person was unable to take a haircut before, place he was freed from jail on Yom Tiv, then he is allowed to take on cholamoid. But normally you want for people to get ready also b'chitzonius, in our case, for their week of Ma'amad. Beautiful. We're moving on to Perek Shvi. The 7th chapter of Klei HaMikdash v'ha'ovdim boi is going to go through, we had this in Masechta Shkolim, all of the 15 offices, and therefore the 15 officers that were appointed in the Beis HaMikdash. Halacha Aleph. This chapter has 20 halachas. Halacha Aleph sagt der Rambam, that Chamisha Asar Memunim Hoya BaMikdash. This is fascinating. There were 15 offices, and therefore officers in the Beis HaMikdash. V'chein memanim lo'olam al kol davar michamisha asar davar elu memuna echad. Each one needed to have their leader. Like I just give you an example. One of the 15 was the office that was in charge of the big day kahuna. We'll see all of the 15 in this chapter. Everything is here. Remember, the Mishnah calls him Pinchas HaMalbish. That means his name was Pinchas. He was a great tailor. He was probably also a great officer. You have to know how to lead a team. And everyone that took his place was called Pinchas HaMalbish. I know this from the Shmata business. The learned Yidden in Brazil, the Shmata business, if someone was like a good one, they called him Pinchas HaMalbish. So in other words, we always needed to have someone filling the position of leader of that group. The Elohein, the Rambam is going to count to 15, and then the Rambam is going to return, and each one will be further unpackaged. Echad al Hazmanim. It's amazing. One office that was designated to make sure that the korbanos are brought in their appropriate time. Everything has to happen bisman. And it's amazing, just like the first mitzvah that Hashem gave to the Jewish people was to make the calendar. But the first thing is Azman. The first thing is to be organized in Zman. 2, second office. Sheni al Me'ila Sha'arim. It's called the gate, the locking of the gates. We're going to unpackage everyone. 3, al Hashem, the one in charge of the guards. Revi'i al Hamashoidim, in charge of the singers. Singers is not the instrument players, but on the singers, and indeed in Chazal there is a machlokes, whether Ikar Shira Bepeh, whether Ikar Shira was Bekeli. There was one for the singers. There was the 5th office, Alat Siltzal, how the symbol, there was only one symbol, how this is specified is amazing. For the symbol, Im Sha'ar Klei Shir. 6th, Ala Payosois, the one who took care of the lotteries. Shvi, the one that took care of the pair of doves. We're going to go through everyone. We're coming back. The 8th, Allah Chisamis on the seals or the tickets. The 9th, Allah Nasachim on the wine libations. The 10th was Mamash, an office for the sick. It was like a medical team. Achad Asar Alamayim, there should be water in the Beis HaMikdash. Shnei Masar Al Maisa Lechem Apanim, the preparation of the showbread. The 13th office was Al Maisa HaKetoides. Doesn't matter if it was made every day or made once a year, but there was an office for it. Arba Asar Al Maisa HaPareich is the preparation of the curtains. And Chamisha Asar Al Maisa Big Day Kohunam.
Rabbi, those were Kohanim or anyone?
That's a good question. That's a good question. That's a good question. I almost remember having that same question when we were learning this in Shkolim, and I wouldn't be surprised if you asked that question there. That would be amazing. I just wondered what I said. Right now I say, I don't know. But you see, the I is very stark. I don't know. I can forgive the I don't know, because the I is still here. No. Some should help me. The guy's l'chaim. Wait, halacha beis. Now, don't think it was only one. Each one of these officers, sometimes people have to be given covet. You have to know how to manage these things. So there were many people. In America, if you're a good officer, you work maybe 30 minutes a day. Big team. You're the big knacker. Because you know, because I. Zeh shalas manim, which is the first one, the time for the korbanos. He was not allowed to come late. He needed to be a punctual guy. Who va'anosha, meaning, kiv, and she gives Esa korban, machresu. He makes announcements. Oy echad na'anosha v'reshusi v'oimer. Imdu hakoyhanim lavoida, uleviim laduchan, uli Yisrael ma'amod. And when that person's voice is heard, halacha gimel. Office number 2 that the Rambam counted on halacha aleph, meaning it's not just, even though the words are ne'ilah means to close, it doesn't only mean to close. Al piv no'alim, they would close the gates of the Beis HaMikdash by shkia. That's when they would close it, guys. They opened it way before Alois HaShachar. We just learned when they opened it. Remember? They would go into the Beis HaMoika. That's how they began this, the opening. Al piv poischen. The ein hatoiken b'chol yoyim l'psichas ha'shorim ela b'reshus. Chol yoyim toiken b'mikdash. Now that we mentioned that one of the ways that people were told it's time to open the gates was through the blowing, but every day there was a minimum of shalosh tkiyos l'psichas shorim, and that was tkiyah, teruah, tkiyah. Does that mean that the Zman Habayis, they already did not know what a teruah means? It could be. So the tkiyah, teruah, tkiyah, maybe it became 9. I don't know. Right? It can be tkiyah, shvarim, tkiyah. It can be tkiyah, shvarim, teruah, tkiyah. Tkiyah, shvarim, tkiyah, teruah, tkiyah. But anyway, the Rambam writes tkiyah, teruah, tkiyah. Allah chadal. Zesh Allah shoimrim. Oh, guys, we learned this in the last chapter of Beis HaBchira. He was talking to the guy called Ish Harabayis. What was his job? Shemasabev al halavim b'chalayla. Even though there were 3 kohanim stations, but he checked on the Levium. He was allowed to hit him with his staff and even allowed to burn his clothing. The one that was the supervisor over the singers, who baited b'chol yoyim. I would say that every person who learns about the beating and smiles, even though you might not be aware of it, in myself, that means that we were probably beaten as children, Aleph, and number 2, that we wrongfully side with our beaters. We have to stop doing that. Because if we side with the ones that beat us, we, God forbid, can become beaters ourselves. You have to be angry at the ones that beat you. Angry. How can you beat a child?
Unless you're part of a system. And beating is not necessarily always physical. Sometimes it could be you're not going home for Shabbos because he fell asleep.
But all of that, any type of pleasure in punishment with Ashmeichel is something to work on. Halacha, Zesh ala Meshayrim, the one who supervises the singers, who baited b'chol yoyim, he was the one that chose every day. Every day they chose different singers that are going to stand on the platform, loy marshira bapeh, and va'al piv toikim ala korbanos. As we'll learn, with the flags, with the whole mice. Ein poichasin b'migdash ma'achas ve'esrei tkiya b'chol yoim. 3 of them, as we just mentioned, l'psichas hasha'arim. 9 tkiyos l'tamen shol shachar. Now you get the seder of the Rambam because I'll be toikin. That's what he has to speak about. V'teisha l'tamen shol arba'im. And on a day that there's a korban musaf, b'sif and teisha l'korban musaf. And the im chal rosh chodesh or yom tov liyas b'shabes, or shechol rosh hashanah liyas b'shabes, sheyesh lam 3 korbanos of musaf. They didn't blow for everyone. Ain't taken b'chol musaf musaf neyatzmai, but elo taken teisha b'lvad l'chol hamusafim. Halacha vav be'erev Shabbos they would add another 3, and we learned this in Hilchos Shabbos. Shalosh lahavtil esa'am min hamalacha. If you remember, the first one was the mincha time. That one was for the people out in the fields to start coming back to the city. With that whole seder, how they would ultimately enter the city only altogether. Second one was later to let people know to shut down the stores. The third one was nakanir shkia, like finish preparing everything. There should not be shehiyah, right, v'chuli on the fire. Ul shalosh lahavdil ben kodesh l'choil. Uberegelen an yom tiv meisif and shalosh l'psicha sharatachtoin. What is that? That's Sha'ar Ezras Nashim that would be opened especially for Yom Tov. Usholish Psicha Shar HaElyon, the opening of the Shar Niknar. And why is that called Shar HaElyon? Because it was Lamaylam Ezras HaNashim. If you remember, when it was in Masechtas Midos, that Rambam wrote this that the Parabais is an incline, but nothing was inclined. Everything was made flat, and then every now and then they would make steps. The Shar HaElyon, which is the Ezras Yisrael, was 7.5 amas taller than Ezras Nashim. Okay, v'chein toikin another 3 when they filled up the water that they would pour on the mizbeach during the holiday of Sukkot. And just to know when they would, when the people who would draw the water in the shiluach, when they would come back to the Beis Hamikdash, that is when they would blow the shofar. The ain't toikin l'milei hamayim the Shabbos. You know why? Because they would not fill up the water on Shabbos. They would fill up the water out of Shabbos and leave it in the Beis Hamikdash. Toikin shalosh agabi hamizbeach, and they would blow it. They would blow another 3 times when b'sha'a shemenasken hamayim, while they would actually be pouring the water. Chol hatoikin shatoikin ala korbanos. All of these. Why are we mentioning it here? They were all working under the direction of that officer, the supervisor, Sha'alam Shaidadim. Now it's amazing because there was another office Shakir for the instrument players, but they're not connected to him. They were connected to the singers. Ubereshusai, Chole Luatkiyos, another detail was Bachatzoitzroit saying, and not on the shofar. So the Chatzoitzroits connected to these steps in the Beis Hamikdash are not related to the office of the instruments. That's connected to the singers. Now, Halacha Zayin is the next office. The office of, instead of saying the musical instruments, the right way of saying it is the office on the cymbals and on all the other instruments. Zesh alat zilzal, hu hamaymit kol hameshredim. He was the one that was in charge of all of the instrument players. Alpi Klei Hashir, Shesei Adem Esalaviem, Kamoisha Be'arno, in Halacha Gimel, Halacha Ches, in Pei Gimel, I mean, Halacha Ches, Zesh Alapayoso the next office, the one that was in charge of the lotteries. Who made this? He was the one that to make sure that there was a lottery amongst the Kohanim of that Beis Av, of that Mishmar. Chol Yoim, Ache Yekol Ishva Ish, Oisem Alachtoi, it's 2 things. It's to make sure there's a lottery, and then to make sure that if you won the lottery, you actually get to do the work. I can have Chaim Yankel winning the lottery, and I'll do the work. That's not okay. And Rambam writes, I will explain exactly how the piyos was done with the circle, with taking off of the hats, with sticking out of the fingers, with counting the fingers. The office that was in charge of the pair of doves. What was his job? Shapoiskin Imoy. See, he was the one that decided what will be the price of the birds. Okay. And v'chol mishu chayev either toirin or b'nei yoina, which are the only two bird types of karbanis. He would not bring the birds to the Beis Hamikdash. He or she would bring their value to the Beis Hamikdash, and they would go to the mamuna. The zeh mamuna would give the kinim labalei hakarbin. The yasach cheshbon imagizbarim, and he would make a reckoning with the treasurer, because who would buy the birds? That's the key. The gizbar of the Beis Hamikdash would buy the birds. The mamuna would be the guy selling the birds. So he has to now give the money back to the temple treasurer. You understand? So he would give the money and he would get the birds. Now, how often would this mamuna sha'ala kilim be poisek the value? He didn't do it every day. It was done once a month. Now, it happens to be that the market doesn't go once in 30 days. The market can fluctuate every day. So here's what's going to happen. If the day that you bought the birds, right, if they were cheaper, in other words, we have to make sure that Yad Kodesh Alol Yoino, that's the Seder, temple will always get the most amount of money. The whole Kain Shenimsa Pasul, what happens if the bird is not good? Like who's going to go out of pocket for that? Or even when you got it from him, it was still good. But then Shenifsal Koidim Sheyikrav. So here's the word. This Memuna would have to provide another bird in its place, which means that he would suffer the loss out of his own pocket. And there were certain offices that they would have to bear a certain amount of financial loss. Halacha Yud, is the office that was in charge.
Because if something happened to the Torah, you're not not to their fault,
doesn't matter.
Suffer the loss. No, but that contradicts the fact that Sheyad Hekdesh Yad Al Yonah.
No, Yagala means, Yakir, that the Gizbar will never get less money than he spent. The Gizbar sometimes will get more money. The Gizbar. You don't buy it from the temple treasurer. The temple treasury were the ones that actually bought the birds. This guy was the one that gave the birds to the client. They gave the birds to the Yidden that were coming there. So what price did they?
So it's the Gizbar that suffers the loss, not. No.
The Gizbar spent it. The Gizbar will always get the money back plus. Because even if the price went up, then the customer has to pay the higher price.
Gotcha.
If, in other words, you got it. In other words, if the Gizbar paid $50 and today it's worth 60, I'm going to pay this guy 60, and he's going to give it to the Gizbar, the 60.
Gotcha.
And if it went down, the guy doesn't go down. If the Gizbar to replace the birds only has to pay 40, I still pay the 50. Halachiyum. Zesh alachisama is the office in charge of the seals. The point is another step, is that people would they would buy a ticket, they would give money to the ticket to the seal givers, and then with the ticket they would pick up what they needed. Hushemekabel, he would get the money of the nesachim, like many of the karbanos would come with different libations. The libations really is not only wine; it's wine and flour and oil, and there are different amounts, especially when it comes to the wine and the oil. If you remember, if you bring a par, you have to bring a chatzi hin of wine, a chatzi hin of oil. Remember, if you bring an ayol, just to make it clear, an ayol is a male lamb in its second year, not in the 13th month, that's called the pilgos, but in the second year, 14th month until 24 months, it's a larger animal. You bring a quarter of a hin, a third of a hin, which is 4 loik. And then if you bring a keves, which is the smallest animal, then you only bring a fourth. So who shemekabel the anasachim and mechuvi anasachim, and they get a seal. The zesh al anasachim, who shemaychen anasachim. For example, there were 4 seals in the Beis Hamikdash. On one seal, you had the word egel. Egel is a calf. A calf also included the par. On the second one, you had the word zachar. Now, zachar means male, but it meant a ayol, a larger male, what we call a ram. And on the third, it says gedi. And gedi doesn't only mean a goat. A gedi can mean a goat or a lamb when they are within the first year. And on the fourth, which was a unique, that's the nesachim that a mitzvah brings, and here he's called the chayte. Now, halacha yud beis called me sheyavi korban islam mikdash. Noisem the mehan nesachim.
The chayte.
Chayte refers just to know the nischim mitzvah. He has to bring 3 korbanos, and they all have to be minat soin. But the truth is that by a mitzvah, as we'll see in a moment, depends whether he's an usher or an ani. If he's an usher, he has to bring a chatos, right? A asham and an oila from animals. That was the chayte. The Rambam is going to spell out each one. Let's go. Allah yudal. Call me sheyavi korban islam mikdash. Korban noisav la mikdash. Noisav the meyan asachim. Lezeh hamamuna Allah chisamois. He would bring the money to the seal guy, to the seal office, to the ticket office, and he would get the seal according to what he has. In other words, Yakir, I'm speaking about, I'm bringing my animal. I'm not buying the animal there, but with the animal comes along this. Now the nesachim I didn't bring myself. That's something that I brought in the Beis Hamikdash, but I didn't buy it from the guy that's selling the oil. I got the ticket and then I picked it up. Like we just mentioned, all 3 korbanos are min hatzoim, but it's a chatos, asham, and oila. Then he would be the guy that's buying 1 seal that says choyte, and all of the nesachim that come with all of the 3 would come along with it. Was another office, the store, the office that actually gave out the nesachim, and he would get the amount of nesachim needed. In other words, the money is now in the hands of the chaysamos. Who has the chaysamos? The guys that gave out the product. Was when they gave out the flour, when they gave out the oil, they got the seal. At the end of every day, they would go back. The ones that were giving out the nesachim would give the seals to the office of the seals. The ones who have the chaysamos would have to give the money to the office of the nesachim. Now, what happens if there's extra money? So then it goes to the Beis Hamikdash. Someone paid too much, no one noticed it. What happens if money is missing? Here also, Yishalem Zeh Sha'ala Chisamois Mi Beisai. They were the ones that lost. Now, another thing, what happens if I buy a seal? I'm a Yid, and I lost my seal. And I run back to the office of the ticket and say, I lost it. They tell me to wait until the end of the day, because if at the end of the day, when they make this monetary reckoning, if there is extra money for what I'm claiming I lost, then they know it's mine. Then that's circumstantial evidence. Another thing, they would write the name of the day because of Ramoyin. Why is that? Because if someone would want, if you can use the seals whenever, then they would buy the seals today. What would happen if tomorrow or in a week the product is more expensive? They would use on that day seals that they paid less money for. Halacha Yud Gimel. Now, Mishloishim Yoim l'Shloishim Yoim Praiskim Shar Hayayin v'Hasoiles im Hamamuna Ala Nesachim. So the guys that gave out the Nesachim, you understand, they're the ones that are buying it from the market. Now they're not using their own money; they're getting money from the Gizbar. So what would be the price for the wine and the flour? You have to establish it, mamish, like we had before, only once in 30 days. And here also, im hukra nesachim, if the established price, right, the price went up. Imagine you're selling to the Beis Hamikdash. You made up for the next 30 days. You're selling a wine for $10. What happens if it became 12? You said $10, or you're going to have to supply it like we had before. And if what happened, but 1 second, but what happens if we establish $10 for the next 30 days, but it went down to $8? Then misapik lem kishar azoil, and which would mean that there can be a surplus of money and a chanami. Is called the moisar mesachar.
Yes, in Halakha it says clearly, poskim imo yushav v'imuzlu akinim misapik kishar azoil. I'm sorry for being a nudge, But this is clearly what it says. So I'm not understanding something. What am I missing?
If I'm the gizbar. If we made up by the birds that I'm paying $1 a bird for the next 30 days, which means you're the vendor, you're choil. I'm representing the Beis Hamikdash. You cannot sell it for more than $1. But if today it went down to 80 cents, I'm only going to pay you 80 cents.
Oh, mitzada, gotcha. Slicha.
Okay. Now back over here. We're middle of Halacha Yud Gimel. Now there's going to be the Moiseh Nesach. What do you do with that money? That money belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. That money is used to buy kayitz hamizbeach. We already said kayitz means figs or dessert. It means that the mizbeach bisman that you can bring korbanos on it between the tamid of the morning and the tamid of the afternoon should never be idle. That's the goal. The ein mekayitz that's the mizbeach va'olos oif. You can never bring birds. She'ein bekorbanos at sibur oif, and the kayitz hamizbeach are always considered korbanos sibur. Halacha Yud Dalid. We're moving on to the next office. Guys, this is a good chazor of their shkolim. Why? Hakoyan. They're standing on the floor, guys. A koyin, chatzitza, right? Mamish. It was barefoot on the floor. Now Yerushalayim and HaKodesh, especially during winter, it's cold. And on top of that, they eat a lot of meat because you can't have anything left over. You have time limits, and there can be many korbanos. So they're standing on the floor. They're eating a lot of meat. And what are they wearing? They're wearing a chaluk echad, as we'll see, God willing, in the next chapter. That affects that they became cholim b'mei'ehen. They suffer digestives, ailments. The Gemara says in the story of Ashkafta the Rebbe, Ksubas Daf Kuf Gimel Kuf Daled, Ruban Sadikin Misasan b'cholim ma'ayin. You have stomach aches, bistat sadik, if it makes you feel better. Oh, so therefore, lefikach, this is called preventative medicine. Mamidim emuna echad, sheyim avakar oisa. So you should check them. Umarape, kol tachloyeyim, va'oisli pahem tamid. See, that's the beautiful thing. You don't wait when it comes to health. Wait until you can't take it anymore. No, every day he would go. He would ask them. He would already nip it in the bud. It's called in English. Who va'anoshav shetachas yodoi. Now we're going to, so we just spoke about the Cholim. The 11th is Halamayim. The Rambam is going on the Seder. Halacha Tezvav is the Mamun Halamayim. What is that? Today we have plumbing. They didn't have plumbing then. Even though there was one pipe in the Beis Hamikdash, I have to remember the name, and that was how the water came to the mikvah that the Kohen Gadol had in the second story, and it looked like magic because the Ein Itam was one a little bit higher. But you needed to bring water in the Beis Hamikdash. V'chein memanim echad. To be choifer, boiroi, cisterns, and vishichen, and reservoirs, and not only to dig new ones, to make sure the old ones are still working. Umesakin haboire shel rabim kidei sheyu hamayim mitzoyim bi Yerushalayim. This is not only for the Beis Hamikdash. This is for the whole Yerushalayim. V'chol adam yoshvei. And imagine when you had millions of Yidden by Yom Tov l'chol oirer l'gan. That was a big job. Next office. One in charge of the craftsmen that are making the panim bread. He would supervise. Masakin means to supervise. I know most supervisors, they don't do tikkun, they do a kilko. So it's, yeah, big masakin. I'll call umane haketoires. And again, masakin malachta. The Beis Haftinas. Halacha Tezayin, they knew the Mala Asher. Oh, he was in charge. They supervised al kol oirgei haporayches. All of those who wove. So there's weaving, and then there is embroidering. We'll have this more in the next chapter. So there's ariga, weaving, and roikimin, to embroider them. Sheiu muchanois, that they should always be ready for the heichal and to the shara. Now says the Rambam mushtei paroichos or yoisim b'chol shana v'shana. And those two paroichesin was lahavdil bein hakodesh v'kodesh hakodesh. Maybe the reason why they needed to make one every year, maybe I'm just suggesting, is because on the avodah of Yom Kippur, and sometimes whenever we had some of the korbanos that are nasois bifnim, but let's go on Yom Kippur, their blood was thrown kneged haparoiches. And there's a machlekes in the Gemara, maybe it's even Tanoim or Amoraim, whether the blood needed to go on the paroiches. That was the whole sugya the Maisa of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, a miracle story, how ultimately when they went into the Rome, into the Vatican, to those Ganovim, and they saw the Paroiches, they saw blood on the Paroiches. That was in the context of this question. Maybe because of that, they made new every year. But they made two every year. Now, don't think these curtains were amazing.
What's by by me is a vada, Rabbi? That's the answer.
Okay, thank you. Okay, they were full in shisha. Now, there were 4 types of threads. Each thread, if you look at your tzitzis, if you're a man, you're going to see that each one is out of 8. Each one is 8. Each one is doubled, and each one is 4. You'll see 4, 2, 4, and 4 is 8. Each one. In the Beis Hamikdash, it was shisha, but there were 4 types. Sheish, linen. Tchelas is wool dyed in tchelas, in chilazim. Argaman, machloikis, guys, whether it's purple or red, I want you to know that. People say purple. It's either purple or red, but again, it's wool dyed in that color. And toila shani, that Rambam writes where it was in a paraduma, that there's a certain, I think, fruit that has in it a seed, and in the seed there's a worm, and the blood of the worm is colored crimson. That's the right word for toila shani. And each one is kafel shisha. Now, you get it? So if you have 4 times 6, 4 times 6 means that ultimately every thread, you have to chap what's going on of it, is 24. And because of that, the curtain was a tefach. And valshivim ushnayim nirim hoisam nereges. There were 72 strings were used to weave it. In other words, if you have to imagine the heddles, we have this in the Hilchos Shabbos, the Batei Nirin, 72. It's a moededik. And indeed, Arka was 40 ames, guys. And the width was 20 ames. That is the size of the Pesach HaHechol. Halacha Yud Zayin Ushalish Esrei Paroiches Hoye B'Mikdasheni. How many sum total? Now, the Rambam says they made 2 for each year. But hold on, there wasn't only 2, there were 13. Why 13? 7 of these beautiful curtains was on each one of the 7 Sharei HaZara that we just learned about. And one of them, which was the largest one, was Al Pischei Shel Ulam, the largest opening. The Achaz was Al Pischei Shel Heichel. 2 of them was La Devir. Right, we had that word. Devir is one of the names for the Kodesh Kachim. And you had 2 downstairs, Beinoy Bein HaKodesh. And when there's an upstairs, even though there was nothing physical upstairs, but you also had the Kodesh HaKachim and the Kodesh, and there also was Shtayim Kenegdan Baaliyah. Count them up, you have 13. Halacha Yud Ches. Now, if a paroiches became tama bivlada tuma, which means not through an avatuma, then Yitaka had to be toivelit. But since you did not have to take it out, you toiveled it bifnim, and right away it was allowed to be rehung because it doesn't need to have shemesh. But if one of these paroiches became tama ba'avatuma, first of all, you have to remove it ASAP. And on top of that, once something becomes over in the level of an ab, yes, you can bring it back in, but you have to wait until it's night. So where do you hang it out? Where do you stretch it out? In the chayil, right in that area, right outside the azara. Furthermore, if it was a brand new curtain, we wanted for people to see the beauty of this curtain. So then, the itztava is the colonnade that we learned about that surrounded the outer limits of Harabayas. Why was it there? Why did they put it there? For everyone to see it. Halacha Yutes. You should know all of the kelim at Shniyim that had backups, copies. And the copies had copies, Shlishim. Why? Because of Tuma. What one did not have backups? Trying to remember. The Gemara says. Maybe it was the Shulchanois. Remember, they used to bring it out, but there was an issue over there about the Chinat become Tamid because there wasn't the backup. I think it might have been the Shulchan because of the Tamid. Okay, I don't remember. Right, the final halacha chav. Now, the last one is we call the office of Pinchas HaMalbish. Now, I want to say something interesting. Stam Lohoid, I was noticing this, that in halacha aleph, that Rambam writes, Al Maise Bigdei Kahuna Gedoyla. And the truth is, why Big Day Kahuna Gedoyla? I mean, he also oversaw the other Big Day Kahuna. And here in Halacha Chav, the Rambam doesn't write the words Gedoyla in the beginning. So that's a kasha that I want to just point out. Maybe the word Gedoyla is a mistaken girsa. You can't do this unless you see it. Anyways, here the Rambam makes it. It's a Ma'aseh Big Day Kahuna. Oisik, but both clear. Bahachonas big Day Kahana Met Yoitis, and all of that will be the next chapter. Oh, Big Day Kohen Gadol. So you have to prepare them, uba arikosam, and the weaving of them, umetachas yodi nasa hakoil, and the lishka hoysel ebamikdash. This was already such a big office that they needed to have an actual chamber. If you remember, that's the chamber near the Shar HaNiknar. So we had the oisa maisa chavitem that were over there in the eastern side near the Shar Niknar, and we had the office of Pinchas HaMalbish. Okay, Chavra, moving on. Let's go. The 8th chapter of Klei HaMikdash v'ha'oivtem boi. This is beautiful. This is the chapter of Big Day Kahuna. This chapter has 19 halachas. It says that I'm a malacha aleph. Let's get going. Big Day Kahuna. Listen to this. There are 3 categories, 3 types, 3 categories. One is Big Day Kohen Hedya. One is called Big Day Zahav, which is what the Kohen Gadol will wear. And one is what the Kohen Gadol wore, unique on Yom Kippur, known as Big Day Lovin. That was not like Big Day Kohen Hedya, as the Rambam will describe. And let's go. Milmato Lamayl. Big Day Kohen Hediyat. Heimar Bar Kalim. What are that Bar Kalim? A kutoines, which is a tunic, which is a shirt. That's not a shirt, it's a rope, a jalaba. Umichnasayim, let's call this leggings. Chasidish gatkes. Umikbas, a hat. Va'avneit, and a gartel, a sash. Va'arbaton, and from the Kohen Hediyat, all 4.
Michnasayim, ve'avnet umikbat.
I'm reading my Rambam, so Yakir is pointing out there's different girsois in what's the Seder. These are very important. If I remember correctly, and I think I remember correctly, that when the Kohen Hediyat would get dressed, the Seder would be the leggings, the kotoinus, and the avnate, and then the mikbas. That's the way he wore it. Okay. Varbatam shel pishtan. Now, one second. The Rambam holds other than the sash that had both pishtan and wool, which means it was made out of linen. They were white. The chutan kaful shisha. Each one of the linen was in itself 6. However, was also, now rakel means embroidered. It was made out of linen, but it was embroidered with semer, because cheles, which comes from the chilazon, is only halachic cheles if it's dyed on wool and not on linen. The ending. And that's the Rambam again, L'shitosei, that's a machlokes that we have in Chazal, that the avneit of the Kohen Hediyat, like the avneit of the Kohen Gadol of the Big Day Zav, was made out of shatnez. Halacha base. Big Day Zav is the Big Day only of the Kohen Gadol. And we call them the Shmoyne Kelim. The Shmoyne Kelim is for Arba'a Shel Kohen, were the same, including the avneit, not of Yom Kippur. That's the Rambam, Psak. And now what are the special added 4 that also had in it some golden threads, which is why they're called, all of them, Big Days of, the Me'il, we'll call that in English the cloak. The ephod, I'll just translate this as the ephod. The choshen is the breastplate, and the tzitz is the forehead plate, or the crown. Now, the nature Kohen Gadol, it says that Rambam, Maisei Roy came who, I take that back, it was embroidered. But the doima, but my savla abnit shall Kohen Hediyat. And here I know for sure there's a machlokes and gersois, right? Yakir, how do you have it over there? Ve'eno doima or ve'doima? I know that in the Rambam, so whichever one you're learning.
Ve'eno by me.
Ve'eno doima. I'm b'chlal gonna follow Rabbi Evan Yisrael. He did a lot of research. In other words, let me say it like this: the Gemara, right? Yuma Daf Yud Beis. Both of them, Rambam, were shatnes. Both had semero pishtan. The question is, what was the tzura of the arigo? So the Rambam is writing this that it didn't look the same. Next, umitznefes, the turban for amura batoyde ba'aroin is the same mikba'as for amura bebanav. Elo, that it was how it was wrapped. It was not wrapped the same way. Kohen Gadol, son of Bakimisha Loifef al Hashevet, the fabric was, let's say, was swept around the way you put something around a hernia. Point is that it didn't go mikbas also from goiva. It wasn't very high. It did not go very tall. Don't forget the Kohen Gadol was the one that had the tzitz, that had God Almighty's holy name on it. So we didn't want for there to be something like substantially taller than it. However, ubanav, which means all of the kohanim had yoitim, they had it wrapped senufim like a normal hat, which was pointy, which was tall. And that's why it's also called a migba'as. And I want you to know that Targum Unkelos teaches Migbas Koiva. Okay, Halacha Big Day Lavan, Hein, or Arba Kalim. Now, what's about the third category? So, Big Day Lavan, Hein, Arba Kalim, Shemashamish, Rem Kohen Gadol, only on Yom Kippur. And what were the four? A kutainis, a tunic, umichnasaim in the leggings, for avneit and the sash, umitznefes. Now, here they're unique. Why are they unique? Because the avneit of the Kohen Gadol, when he wore the Big Day Lavan, did not have tchelis in it. V'arbata levanim, v'chutam kafel shisha, umin hapishtan levadoyein. The chap, not like the avneit that was worn by the Kohen Head, not like the avneit that was worn by the Kohen Gadol. Another din, ushtei kutainis acheres ha'yilei Kohen Gadol miyam kippurim. One of them was uniquely worn b'shachar. When he went into the we're speaking about b'shachar when he did the unique avodah of Yom Kippur. Right, there was twice that he went. He went to the mikvah 5 times. He washed his hands 10 times. Well, we had all that. So when he wore the big day lavan 2 times, when he entered, he would wear this special tunic. And both of them was b'shloishim mana shel hegdish. Right, this is not weight, guys. I want to tell you, this is the value, that it was extremely expensive, and it wasn't that it didn't cost more. That was the minimum amount that you would spend, and if the Kohen Gadol wanted to spend more money, gesund to hate from your own pocket. But before he bought it, he had to be magdish the money, and only then they would make the ketonis. Big day kahuna, mitzvasan shiyu chadashim. They should be new. They should be beautiful. Noim and umishul shalim. They should be hanging low, not the kapates are slowly becoming miniskirts. Not like that. Long. Kederech big day hagadolim, because noble people don't wear short garments. Sheneman, as it says, l'kavod, for honor and for beauty. And short is not honor nor beauty. How ironic. People think they have beauty. Want to be beautiful? Wear a long garment. Now, if they got soiled, or if they got torn, or if they were if they were too long, we'll see it should be right above the ankle. It went lower. You want to have a short. It went.
Tashin, what do you refer when Rambam refers from metushtashin?
Any other garments. We'll see that Rambam writes.
Yeah, but what metushtashin means?
It means soiled, shmutzik, or if it was too long, or ktsarim. As we'll see soon, that I'm right exactly. No, the kutainis was going to be right above the ankle, but because the guy wore the gartel, it hoisted it up, it lifted it up, and he did the avodah when it was too short. Avodah psula, wow, but if it was mishu chakim, if it was worn out, it's not nice, but b'diavad will be good. It was really too long. But you made it the right height because the avneit hoisted it up, and now shenasa kimidasa avad b'diavad avidas k'sheira. Halacha. Call back in the big day kahuna. Go ahead, Yakir.
No, Stam, don't be a shlumper.
Mamish. Beis Hamikdash, the gashmiistic external beauty was also important. Call back in the big day kahuna. Shenasa soy, if it became soiled. You're not allowed, you can't bleach it. There's no solution. You don't wash it. What do? You would leave it to make wicks out of it. The Rambam is going to go into greater detail about the wicks later and get new ones. Big day Kohen Gadol shabalu. Once they got worn out, they were not made into wicks. They needed geniza. And finally, big day love him. And we're speaking about that he bought one kutainis for shachris and one for mincha, and they would worth at least the 30 mana, and he maybe sometimes more. They would never wear it again. As it says explicitly, and they become asur bahana. And as the Rebbe explains, Gavaldik, that just like Kohen Gadol, the beged of one Kohen Gadol was never allowed to be used for another Kohen Gadol, never. Tshuva means that when I do tshuva, next year I'm a new person. So how can he wear the same beged next year? He's nicht derselbe Kohen Gadol. Why? Because of Yom Kippur. Allah chavav, michne say kohanim et yoitim, if their garments got balu, right? So here, by the Kohen Gadol geniza, by the Kohen Hedyet, so like this. The michnosayim, the leggings, and the avneit, and the gartel, that which covers the lower part of the person. What's the lower part of the person? The struggle with the animal, the division between the animal and the higher. That struggle actually is the highest. And therefore, they were used to make wicks for Simchas Beis Hashem. The biggest simcha is when a person figures out how to manage the lower animal. However, the upper begadim, the kutoinas, the tunic, hakoyanim ed yoitim, shabalu, they were made into the psilois wicks for the menorah, gavaldik. Which one is greater? They're different. So the menorah represents pure and edel and calm, but the simcha, dafke from the avoid over here. Halacha zayin. Kol big kehanim. And a boy melam shal tzibur. Shal tzibur means guys from the kesem of the half a shekel.
We are going through a mamish beauty. Speechless. Mamish beautiful.
Yes. Ashreinu matoiv chalkeinu chaver. This is all the trait of the Rebbe. And halavai, we should zecher to remember more. The Rebbe taught us how to learn. Kol big kehanim and a boy melam shal tzibur. That's the half a shekel. However, there's a solution. How? First, he gives it over to the tzibur, and now that it belongs to the tzibur, mutar. That if she is not as long as he fully gave it over to the tzibur. Halacha ches big day kohanim had yoites. There were many sets that they made. This office that we learned in the previous chapter, Pinchas HaMalbish, they made a lot. And not only that, listen to what they did. The shisha utishim chaloin. A chaloin means a window, a chaloin means a locker. There were 96 lockers in the Beis HaMikdash. Now, guys, hold on. How many mishmaris did we ultimately have? Al Yidei Shmuel David? 24. 24 times 4, it's 96. In other words, each mishmar had their own begadim, and each beged was always kept separate. That's the 96. Laniach behena begadim. Meaning, arba chaloinis l'chol mishmar. V'shem kol mishmar kosav al chaloinoisa. Everyone, they went to their own. And they were all kept closed. Uchshi konsu anshe mishmar la'avoida b'shabbos shalahem. That is when poischim chaloinoiseyem, during the entire week, they took out their kelim, and uchsheyetzu machzirim habegadim l'chaloinoisa v'soismim. Halacha tes. In other words, we wanted, why can't you have a 24? No, we didn't want for any of the 4 to be intermingled. Not to have the garments intermingled. And they wrote michnasayim, and it says avnei, all is the lashon of the Rambam. Right? Kasha, like, why doesn't he write the words mikba'as? I know it's the same, but it's not the same. Okay, right. Kasha. Add it to the kashas. Halacha yud. Koyin gadol maniach bigdei zav balishka shaloi. The lishka shaloi we learned in Pedekei. Or be'eshe yetzim en hamikdash. Halacha yud alef gavaldik. Bigdei kahuna mutar leihon is bohem. With one exception, again, the avneit l'ramam l'shitasi, that's shatneis. And I want to tell you that in many Rambams, here is not a halacha yud beis, here is still a hemshech regarding the avneit only, no matter whether you have a halacha yud beis or not here. Asur l'koyin hedel l'lav shoy, only the avneit ela b'shasu avodah, because it's shatneis. Now let's go halacha yud beis. Ein hakoyanim loif from l'avodah. There isn't any other fibers that are used. Or the word bad, it always refers to pishtim, linen, and that is butz. That's called linen. Now, whenever the Torah used the word tcheles, that is a wool that's dyed to the color like the pure heaven, which is pasuch min hakoichal. It's a little bit lighter than dark blue. Okay, that's how you touch it. The Rambam writes that Taich in Peres HaMishnayos.
Patuch means that it's mixed. It's the white and the blue mixed together according to Hebrews. It's the cloud.
How do you get the lighter? Because you add blue, white and blue, whether you're a Zionist or not. We're with the white. We're for white and blue. Just to know, Pikabal, according to the Ramak, that white is Chesed, the right side. Blue is Chachma. That the Hisgabrus of the Yemin al Asmoil.
Avira Eretz Yisrael Machkim.
Very Machkim. Oh, Gavaldik, I love that. Ooh, that was the best. That was the Avir. That's the blue. It's very blue. And what's the opposite? Just to know, Bina is green. Gevura is red. That's why green and red together, that's the Mitzoida. That's Tuma. And all of the enemies of Israel intuitively know to make their flags red and green. They know that because they represent the Tzad HaSmoil, which is the Shaidish of all evil. They're the evil, so they write their source. We're Kedusha, we write our source. All right, Ho'argomon. Now here, see, the Rambam writes clearly, according to this version, the Rambam writes Argomon is red. And I told you, I know that some people say purple, but anyways, the Rambam is writing the word Adam. Toilas Shani is crimson. The Rambam wrote in Hilchas Paraduma, there's a Toilas, right, that has some sort of, there's a seed that has in it this Toilas. And they would squeeze out its dam and they would get this crimson color. Halacha Yudal. Kol Makam Shanam about Toilas Sheish. Or Sheish Mashzar. The word Mashzar means spun. It means now you know why if Sheish and Bad are the same, which is what the Rambam wrote on Halacha Yud Gimel, the Torah doesn't write same. There has to be a difference. And whenever the Torah uses the words Bad means levad, alone. It's also kosher. Nevertheless, it's always a mitzvah. Whenever the Torah writes the words Mashazar, what does that mean? That's bilvad. Now you get it. Sheish Mashzar Yakir 6. Sheish Mashzar. Because Sheish is like a 6. If the Torah just writes Mashzar, it means 8. Halachat as well. The work of embroidery. What does that mean? We want for a design which should be woven, should be seen from one side, which is normally what happens. Whenever the Torah says Masa Choshe, you have to have real Chachma here. That is, you have a design that you can see from both sides. And sometimes in the Beis HaMikdash, the Chachma was that the same threads that made a lion in one side made an eagle on the other side. It's an unbelievable Chachma. Panavach, Halachat Design. Chesed Matzah Begodim, Haku Toines, the tunic, Ben Shel Kohen Hedyed, Ben Shel Kohen Gadol, were Mishu Betzes, Hoysa, they were box, light, knit, which means she button ba'arigasa, just like naturally in the animal's maw, there's a box-like protrusion in there. So it was all made out of linen, but it was boxy. Like weavers make by firm garments, that's the way all of them were done. Now, another detail, their sleeves were woven separately, and then with stitches. That was the only stitched part, not woven part. The connection between the hands, which are midois, and the guf. I want you to know, guys, that the Gashmias, we know today that in the brain, you know what takes up the most real estate in the brain? Hands and mouth. Much more than the body. It's like a okay, halacha yuzai. Oide chakotoines adam aylam ha. Okay, we said that has to be long, not short. Not too long. Right above the heel. And the length of the sleeve is at pas yodoi. All right, and in other words, wrist. It has to go until the wrist. And the width is the width of the hand, of your hand. Halacha yudches. Hamichnasaim, the leggings. Ben shel kohen gadol, ben shel kohen hedyed, is mimosnayim ad yerechayim. Now, what does it mean, mimosnayim? Right, from the loins until your thighs. Taiches the Rambam. Where does the misnayim begin? Above your belly button, above the navel. Actually, kadav min halev. The older you get, the higher your pants go. That's a klal gadol. I don't know where that came from. I had a big Chassidish guy that to blow his nose, he would open the zipper. You know, the older you get, the pants start going up. So the taka, it should be that's where the beginning of your pants should be. That's the plate. And how low? Until the knee. By me also, if I would pick up my pants until my heart, it would go until the knee. We have it in the wrong place. You have to know the way the Torah looks at it. And there were straps to tie it. It shouldn't go low. There was no holes in the leggings. In other words, by not to go to the bathroom, not here, not there. Ella mukafim kameikis. No, it's the genital area. There was like a pouch that surrounded it. Halacha, you testify on halacha.
Those clothing to the bathroom? No. These are.
They would have to remove it. They would remove it.
Yeah.
Halacha, you test. I think that's also bachavadik. Remove it. Hametz nefes. We learned about the Beis Hakisei shel kavod. Anyways, under the Beis Hamoika, that's where they went down to it. Hametz nefesh shel kohen gadol. The final, the turban, the hittel, the hat is arka sheish esrei amo. Can you imagine? And again, like we said, the way it was wrapped, the kohen gadol wrapped it more turban-like, and the kohen hedyot wrapped it more tall-like. But you began with a 16 amma long mitznefes. And the gartel, listen, it was only rachvei k'may shalosh bites. Every etzma means a thumb breadth. But you know how long it was? It was shtayim u'shloishim amma. Wow. Lamed beis. Nesivois, peliois. They're going to chachma. Umakifoi, umachziroi, kerech al gabe kerech. Wind after wind. Ubig de kahuna kulam. They were not sown. As the Torah writes, to be continued.
Beautiful.
Gavaldik. And just to know that the next one will be she. Very good. Tes and Yud and Bias Hamikdash Aleph. Gavaldik. To be continued.